Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Selnar's Minis. Today we're going to work on a project, a little goblin who I'm going to make a goblin dragon slayer by the name of Gitzup. As you can see on the turntable, these are the paints that I used for this project, but missing from this is the Citadel washes that I used. I will include those in the description below. Included in this set of paints that I'm using, along with my normal Army Painter paints, is some Army Painter Speed Paints 2.0 and Army Painter Airbrush paints. I gotta say that I'm really happy with these paints. The airbrush paints because they're already thinned, I don't have to do anything with them. And the speed paints because, well, they did speed this project up quite a bit. So you'll see that here in the future, but I just want to say I'm really impressed with these paints. And if you haven't used them, you should give them a go. So we're starting this project off by first priming this miniature in black. After that dries, I'm going to go ahead and use Army Painter Dungeon Gray to provide my midtones. I'm ultimately going to end up using kind of a zenithal highlight method in order to get this model prepped for painting. I am doing the Dungeon Gray at a 60 to 75% angle, trying to catch as much as I can. And after that dried, I went in with white, and for this I'm going directly above to about a 30% angle to catch the edges and provide ourselves our light source without having to actually manually do it through each stage. After providing a zenithal highlight using a dry brush method, we're going to go ahead and start painting our friend Gitzup. I'm going to start off with Army Painter's Shamrock Green. This is one of those cases in which, though, the picture on the bottle of the finished dried product is much lighter than the color that I ended up with. I like the color I ended up with, but I was kind of hoping for a lighter green, as this is a goblin. But that's okay. He's a tough goblin. He's a dragon hunter. So we're going to go ahead and apply this paint to all the flesh that is visible on this model. Now this paint goes on really well. It glides on. Unlike some of the Citadel paints where it feels like you're pushing glue, this is a nice, smooth feeling. I will say, though, it is kind of like a felt tip pen. So if you go back and have to apply more and the paint is dry, you will end up with darker streaks on your model. So keep that in mind when you're using speed paints, is that they are kind of like a felt tip pen. So if you go back and try to paint an area that you think is just a little bit too light, you might end up with an area that is much darker than you desire. One other thing of note for any of these quick and easy paints like speed paint or contrast that any new painter should keep in mind is that these are not really designed for you. You need some decent brush control in order to use these paints properly. If you were to accidentally paint a darker colored pigment paint over a lighter one using this method, it would be very, very difficult to fix that. And so I recommend using normal acrylic paints to get your brush control, and then moving on to these sort of paints to help you move your armies or your miniatures along faster. Here I'm using Army Painter's Broadsword Silver. The metallic paints from this range are great. They cover well, they have great pigments, and it's not a hassle to put them on, and there's not a whole lot of streaking going on. After I finished the spearhead, I went ahead and decided I wanted to paint all the leather areas on this model. This included, for this color, the belt and the mantle on his shoulders. Again, quick and easy coverage, great paint. This is Army Painter's Hardened leather. I was pretty happy with this. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint this in all these areas, and I'll be back to talk here soon. Alright, so I wanted to bring some color into this model, so I decided to use the Wyrmling Red from the Army Painter Air range. This paint is originally designed just to go through an airbrush, but you can use a brush on it, just like any other airbrush paint. That comes in most of the lines that people are familiar with from miniature painting. So I'm just going to go around and paint the tassel at the bottom of the spear with this Wyrmling Red. After I had painted the tassels on the spear, I went ahead and painted the spear shaft with Citadel's Wyldwood. This is a nice, dark, rich brown color, and I wanted it there to kind of represent that the wood had soaked up some of the blood of the dragons that this goblin had been fighting. Alright, and you may notice that his pants are painted. I used hardened leather on them as I had with the belt and the mantle. And what I'm going to paint next, even though you can't see it because it's blurry, I'm going to go around and paint Gitsup's tunic deep blue from Army Painter's paint range. And this is a nice, good contrast to the browns and the green of his skin. So I'm going to go around and paint this, and I'll be back on soon. Alright, after we are done with painting the tunic, we're going to go ahead and paint the fur lining of his footwear. I'm going to go ahead and use, I believe this is werewolf fur on this section. Going to go around and do some equal coverage so you can still see some of the shadows in that. I also painted the leather pouch in leather brown off camera by the looks of it. And we're just going to go around and complete the fur lining of the footwear. After I finished painting the fur portion of the footwear, I went ahead and started to paint the wraps around his feet. So for this, I'm going to use Army Painter's Monster Brown. And I will be back on to speak at you after I'm done with this process. After all the base layers had dried, I started to provide shading to various areas of the model. So for the tassels on the spear, I'm using Carroburg Crimson to shade it. For the tunic and the fur lining of the boots, I will end up using Nuln Oil. And for all the other brown areas like the wrappings of the feet and the leather pouch, but not the belt or the hood or the pants, I'm going to use Agrax Earthshade. So I'm going to go around and apply all these to various areas. And once I'm done with that, we'll get back on and talk to you about the next process. Okay, as I go around and I'm applying the washes to this miniature, let's talk a little bit about Gitzup. Gitzup is a goblin from the mountains who has had a rough life. Like all other goblins, things are not easy. And at an early age, he decided he wanted to be a hunter. However, Gitsup's aim with a bow is terrible. So Gitzup had to learn the spear. Now, some of you may have noticed when it's in focus versus when it's been not in focus currently, that Gitsup's spear has some teeth marks in it and it's slightly bent. Story-wise, this is one of favorite Gitsup's dragon hunting expeditions. He almost died. He doesn't care about that. He lived. He's not even sure if the dragon's still alive. He at least hopes not, because some dragons hold a grudge. But basically, he went to go stab the dragon and stabbed the dragon in the cheek. And the dragon got a little pissed off and decided to chew on the spear while it was in his mouth. And when Gitzup pulled it out, while the spear wasn't broken, it definitely was bent and had pit marks in it from the teeth. And so Gitzup, rather than fixing it, fell in love with the spear and kept it the way it was. Alright, as you can see here, I have returned to applying the base coat of the Wyrmling Red on the tassel. I'm going to go around and do this all the way around the spear and the tassels. And then I will go through and add a little bit, I think, of white to it to help brighten it up a little bit more and provide more of a highlight. So what exactly happened to this miniature to get this chew mark is quite simple. My cat at the time decided that the spear was a good chew point and felt good inside the mouth. I luckily caught him before he got too far, but that's why the spearhead is formed the way it is. After finishing the tassel on the spear, I went to work on his blue tunic. And we're going to start off with returning to deep blue and reestablishing that as the base color, except for in the deep recesses of his shirt. As you may have noticed, the video keeps going in and out of focus. I'm not exactly sure why that occurred on this particular set of videos, but it is what it is. I will go ahead and apply the deep blue, like I said, to all the raised areas, leaving the black in the recesses. And as I slowly go around and highlight this model, I will be adding small amounts of white to the deep blue in order to get those brighter highlights. So I'll get back on once I'm done doing all this, and we'll continue to talk about our friend Gitzup. Alright, so after I finished the tunic, I decided that the mantle on his shoulders was too light. So I went back over parts of it with the hardened leather. Forgive me, apparently this is out of focus and mostly off the screen. But we're going to go ahead and go through and repair or darken the hardened leather look as I saw fit. I had also mixed a little bit of Banshee Brown in with the hardened leather. I'm using this to provide some highlights for the leather belt, and I'll be using it up on the mantle as well. And I will also further highlight this by going straight to the Banshee Brown. So I'm going to go around and paint, and I'll be back soon. After I had provided the highlights to the leathers, I went around and started to do some weathering and some damage to all the leather areas on Gitzup. So once I'm done with that, we'll be back on and we'll be talking some more. Alright, and so now we're going to start working on the leather pouch. We're going to start off with leather brown. We're going to go ahead and start to fill in the areas we want to be returned to the base color versus leather brown shaded by the Agrax Earthshade. So I'm just going to go around and do this, and as I go, I'm going to slightly lighten up the leather by adding Monster Brown to it until I finally get to just pure Monster Brown. So we're going to go ahead and paint that, and I'll be back soon. After we had finished the money pouch, I went to work on Gitsup's foot wraps. Now his foot wraps are either made out of a cloth or out of soft leather. And for this reason, I'm going to keep the coloration of these wraps kind of a light brown. So we're going to return back to the Monster Brown that we originally used, and leaving the Agrax Earthshade in the recesses or at the edges, deep edges of the wraps. We're going to maintain that contrast, but we're going to slowly build up the color from Monster Brown to Banshee Brown. We're going to go to a 2-to-1 mixture of Monster Brown to Banshee Brown, and then we'll go to a 1-to-1 mixture of Monster Brown to Banshee Brown, and then a 1-to-2 ratio of Monster Brown to Banshee Brown, and then finally Banshee Brown as by itself to provide the brightest highlights. So I'm just going to go around and do this. It's not very hard work, it's just time consuming, and also trying to just make sure you don't cover up all the Agrax Earthshade in the recesses. After I had finished the wraps, I moved on to Gitsup's skin. So his skin color base is Shamrock Green. And so I wanted to lighten up a little bit, so I added a little bit of Goblin Green in with the Shamrock Green. So this is going to start off as a 2-to-1 mixture, so 2 parts Shamrock Green to 1 part Goblin Green. And I'm going to go around and hit all the areas that are pretty light on his skin and bring a little bit deeper color in. It's still lighter than the Shamrock Green, but it's a little bit darker than it was when it was just the Shamrock Green over the white. And I'm going to go around and hit all these areas, and once I'm done with that, I'm going to go to a 1-to-1 ratio of Shamrock Green to Goblin Green, and then I'm going to go to a 2-to-1 ratio of Goblin Green to Shamrock Green, and then finally just Goblin Green. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and go around and paint different areas on his skin. Alright, here's a bit of a nerve-wracking part for me. I am using a Reaper Miniatures old discontinued paint called Red Black inside the mouth to give it some color. It's a little bit nerve-wracking in the sense of if I got it on that green, it would be really difficult to clean up. And then after that, I am using a Reaper Miniatures paint that is just a sample. It's kind of a brass-colored metal that you can't purchase. It was just a sample they gave me, and I'm doing this on his earring and all the metal studs on the mantle, and I believe that is all the places that I'll be using that on. I had a little bit of a heart attack here too because I got a little bit too much on one spot and I had to clean it up. But other than that, it came out fairly well. And so after I did that, I decided that I wanted to give some color to the spear, so I took that red black that I had left over on my palette and I went through and thinned it and just started placing it in all the recesses and the teeth marks. And then after I do this, I believe I go through and thin out some rust as well. My iron oxide that you see at the beginning of the video, and doing the same thing, just, you know, keeps it clean as much as he can for a goblin, but he's still a goblin. It rusts a little bit. He cleans off the worst of it, but there's still some coloration and some rust left behind. As some of you may have noticed, I did paint the face for Gitzup off camera. That kind of work is still kind of very delicate for me and really hard to do underneath an iPhone and in a small, short area. So I haven't said it so far in this video. I'm going to say it now. Paint fearlessly. It's just paint. You can fix any issues that come up. Once again, I kind of live by this motto, and while this may turn out to look terrible, I am going to go ahead and use an Army Painter 2.0 speed paint called Familiar Pink. I'm going to use this to provide some coloration to Gitzup's nose, knuckles, and elbows, just to provide a little bit more contrast and interest to this model. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply just a little bit more of this paint to his nose, and it's going to look really pink. And then I'm going to go ahead and fix it by diluting some Goblin Green and going over it. So here's the finished product. Once again, I'm going to ask you to like and or subscribe to my channel so you can see more of my work. I'm pretty happy with the way this turned out. I'm really happy with the way the speed paints turned out. It did speed up this project quite a bit, and I'll be integrating these paints more into my painting just to make my life go a little bit faster and get some more miniatures on the table done. Gitzup will be used in other games that I have, like Rangers of the Shadow Deep and Frostgrave. Once again, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. And if you like what you see, please like and subscribe. Thank you. Bye.